Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Zeesean Raza from Century 21 and Innovative Realty, and we are now at episode number 14. And today's going to be a good one because I've got my good longtime friend, Zeesean Sheikh, who is a founder and lawyer, principal lawyer at Prestige Law, and he specializes in immigration, real estate law. And we're going to get him to talk about immigration, newcomers to Canada. How can you come to Canada? You know, what are the different ways to come to Canada? And after that, we're also going to discuss when you do come to Canada, what are the best ways to look for a property, whether you're renting or buying. So thanks, Zeesean, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Zeesean. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know this has been a long time coming. We've been talking back and forth. And just to kind of give the audience a bit of a background. So we go way back. Like, I know you from childhood, and it's amazing to see your career because I've been following it for quite some time. And
yeah, same here as well. Seeing you.
And I remember like 10 years ago when we both first got started, I was in real estate. I'd call you about real estate, and you'd call me and you'd tell me that you're doing your studying for your law exams and whatnot. And it's great to see where you are right now.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
So congrats on that.
And it's good to see what you're doing and how you're informing the community, keeping them well aware of all the latest current events in the real estate market, and it's very informative. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. So before we get to all the technical questions, just want to kind of get a bit of a background about yourself. How did you get started in the industry, and what were some of the struggles that you went through?
So you put me on the spot here, right? I wasn't expecting that, but okay. So as Zeesean mentioned, we're longtime friends. My name is Zeesean Raza Sheikh, and I was born and raised in Sarnia, Ontario, which is about 3 hours southwest from Toronto. And growing up, then my family later moved to the big city, Toronto, for more opportunities for colleges, universities, and a better, employment perspective, right? So when I came to Toronto, then I met Zeesean, obviously, when I came as a child, and then I wanted to do something in which my parents, because they came as immigrants to this country, and I wanted to make them proud at the end of the day, right? Just like any, children of any immigrants, that they realized the struggle that their parents had endured, coming here with literally nothing. My father came here with not even a single dollar in his pocket, didn't speak a single word of English, but today his son is a practicing lawyer in Toronto, right? So this is the Canadian dream, right? So that's a little bit about me. And I went to law school in the UK, came back, did my accreditation exams, then I wrote the bar, and then, I'm here, now having my own law practice in Richmond Hill, Ontario, where I specialize in immigration law. I also do real estate and business law as well. So, and as Zeesean mentioned, today we'll be speaking about the immigration impact on the real estate market. So,
yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, that's a story that I can relate to as well, because my parents came in 1990, and it's been almost 32 years now in Canada. Wow. So time flies, but even my parents, like, they came here. Not a lot of money in their accounts. My dad basically left his family. Yeah. And when I go back and I think, is that something that I would be able to do? I don't know if I'd be able to do that. But what they did was huge for us. And now we're sitting here, honestly.
And now our children will reap the benefits, right?
Absolutely,
right,
yeah. So that's going with the theme for today's topic when it comes to immigration. We're both immigrants, we've been here and we're prime examples of how you can settle into Canada and get your career started. But let's talk about the actual topic now. Now, I know Canada itself is a safe haven for newcomers, immigrants, because of diversity and culture. Yeah. But just talk to the audience about, why, in your opinion, Canada is still such a popular destination for newcomers.
I think you hit the point, and then just in your question itself, where you mentioned the diversity itself is what grasps the entire world. If you speak about Canada, everyone immediately says Toronto or Niagara Falls, one or the other, right? Or Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, right? And the only reason they're aware of these cities, who are, because of social media, because of movies, because of television, and they see the diverse culture, right? They could see that's how people from all different backgrounds are embedded into society, carrying on their own lives at the same time, practicing their religions, practicing their customs and traditions, whether they're immigrants from South Africa, whether they're immigrants from the Middle East. It doesn't really matter, because everybody lives in a wholesome society here. Like that's what you realize here. Everybody lives as one big family.
Right. Yeah, the diversity is definitely there, and even now more so ever. Like, you have a religion, cultures. I mean, we're an example of where we are going to a community, a mosque, where there's so many people coming into the country every single year into our city, and we get to meet so many people. But now, as these people are coming in, for those that are watching maybe abroad that are thinking of coming to Canada, like, what is, I guess, a high level, what are some steps that they can take to get an application or immigrate to Canada eventually?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first and foremost, they should contact an immigration professional, right? It's better to make sure that they contact someone who is licensed and registered with either the IRCC or with the Law Society, right? Because what's happening these days, there's a lot of fraud taking place. So you have to make sure that you are choosing the right legal professional to help you with your immigration to Canada, right? So that, as I mentioned, if someone does contact an immigration lawyer, they should ask them, what are the documents that are needed to start the process, right? So the very first thing I would say is that obviously after contacting the lawyer, you should get your documents in order, right?
Yeah.
You should go online yourself, do some research. Then after contacting your legal professional, then you should have a consultation with him, in which he would then request those documents, and then he would do a comprehensive assessment.
Okay.
Right? And after completing that comprehensive assessment, he would then issue the results as what programs that you can qualify for based on your qualifications.
Yeah. So for me, I'm learning because I don't know too much about the immigration system and how it works. But I've seen people, my friends come, they're either professionals or they're students. But I've always wondered, like from a professional standpoint, if let's say you have a background in software engineering or whatever, doctor, whatever it is, how does that work? Is it easier for you to come to Canada? And what is the process for those individuals?
No, obviously if you're educated, right, and you have a decent career, then that is much easier to come as a skilled immigrant under the federal skilled worker program, which is a category of the express entry system. I guess we could talk about that a little bit later, but just going back to your original question, if someone is a software engineer, how can they come to Canada?
Yeah. So, or any career. Like kind of skilled worker,
we'll just use that example for now, right?
Yeah.
So then obviously they would have to number one, they would have to send in their CV right, to their immigration lawyer or consultant. They would have to do an IELTS test, right, which is an English language testing exam, right, that they would have to write in their home country, right?
Yeah.
So that or any other recognized English-speaking examination, certification, right, that they could actually send into the Canadian government, verifying their English level skills in reading, writing, speaking, and listening, right? Okay. So this is it's a band-based system, right? So overall, they would need like 7 bands, right? So each category has their own bands, right? So overall, as I mentioned, if you have a 7 bands IELTS result, in addition to that, you have your CV for your professional to review. In addition to that, you would also need your education evaluation report. Okay. So you would have to submit it to a majority of my clients. Yeah. They either go to they submit their online transcripts to World Education Services. Right. And they charge them a fee. And what happens is that they choose that there's an option there under WES, like where if they're going to Canada, they could choose the option of saying, yes, I'm applying for immigration to Canada, so therefore I want to know what is the equivalency of my education in Canada. Yeah. Right? So they would evaluate your credentials and your education, and they will issue you basically a result indicating whether your degree is recognized as the same level to that of engineering degree in Canada, right? Yeah. So if it's a 4-year bachelor's degree, it should be recognized as a 4-year bachelor's degree in Canada, right? Yeah. So saying that, so now you have your resume, now you have your IELTS test, and now you have your WES report ready. So when the lawyer or the representative conducts his or her assessment of your file, then they would calculate your points. They're called it's a Canadian rating score. Okay. So these days the cutoff is about 470, 480 because the draws do take place every 3 to 4 weeks and for different programs. So and basically if you meet the threshold and you meet the minimum points, and if you're married, then your spouse's points are also calculated under the same assessment, right? Because after completing your CRS assessment, then we know exactly where you're standing and how many points you're having. Right. And maybe some programs have a less of a threshold. Like for example, there's also provincial programs separate from the federal programs that have a minimum threshold, right? Where it's easier to get immigration in those provinces as opposed to under some of the federal programs, which require a higher threshold for points, right?
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. No, this deserves like 3 or 4 episodes because there's so much to talk about. Yeah,
so much to talk about.
But I mean, in this episode, we're going to kind of get you a high level idea. So if you have any questions, obviously Zeesean is here to assist you.
Yeah, so this is more like, I guess, a general,
very general
discussion, right? Just so because maybe what we can do in the future, maybe have some Pacific oriented episodes, right?
Absolutely.
Where we could discuss topic by topic, right? But this is just to touch on all the general principles of what's taking place, right? How to come to Canada, like what's taking place in the latest immigration programs, how to come to Canada, right? And, what are the key points that we could take away from this episode in order to help those, right, who are thinking about coming to Canada, right?
So just taking to this question specifically now, okay, so now if somebody, let's say, is a software engineer, just use that example again, and they're thinking of coming to Canada, typically how long is that process going to take from start to finish from a time length perspective?
Yeah, so we'll go back to after the a legal representative completes their assessment, after calculating the points, what happens is that we create an express entry profile.
Okay.
So after creating a profile, we basically list all your qualifications, your background, your information, your family members, your spouse, your children, everything indicate with your, and their education as well. So after creating a profile, we submit this to a express entry pool.
Okay.
So this is like a lottery-based system, right? So the government, as I mentioned, every several weeks they do a draw.
Right.
And after completing the draw, if your name comes out, then if your name is chosen, then they send you an ITA, an invitation to apply.
Okay.
So once you receive an invitation to apply, that's like a pre-approval, right?
Got it.
That's
my language.
You're applying for a bank loan or something, and you get a pre-approval. That's what basically is in simple terms, right? They say, look, we evaluated your credentials. We've seen what you have. Now, okay, you just stated what documents you have. Now they say actually submit the documents that you claim that you have. If you have an IELTS report saying that you have 7 bands overall, or if you say that you have an education that's recognized in Canada, then they should now submit all the proof that we need to show that you meet the necessary requirements, right? So so after you're getting the ITA, what happens is that you have to complete the entire application from A to Z, and then you submit that application, right?
Okay.
Into the pool, right? Yeah. So in the pool you submitted the original application. Now after you're getting your ITA, now you're submitting directly to the federal government now your application, right, to IRCC, right? I remember speaking mostly about the federal skilled worker program, right? There's also other programs like BMP and federal trade worker, but the most common program
is the federal.
Especially without a job offer. Right now we're speaking without a job offer, right? Just based purely on skills. If someone's a software engineer in their home country and they want to come to Canada, it's based on the fact that they have experience working as a professional software engineer. Right. So this is the best and most practical way to come to Canada is to apply under the express entry system, under the federal skilled worker program, right? Okay. And as I mentioned, so after receiving your invitation to apply, we fill out the formal application. Okay. And attaching all the documents, attaching the bank statements as well. You need to show proof of funds. Okay. Yeah. Right. So at least it needs to have that. I think it's about $23,000, right? Right. You need to show at least 3 to 4 months of a bank statement, right? Yeah. From the time that they issued you the ITA. Yeah. Right.
That basically tells the government that you can afford to live here
for several months
for a few months while you get a job, right?
Exactly, because they wouldn't want you to come to Canada
without any money.
And the reason is because they don't want you to ask for social assistance.
Got it.
That's the main reason, right?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't want you to request social assistance. So therefore, it's mandatory for you to have a minimum number of funds, right, before coming to Canada. So usually it's about $20-something thousand, right, for a 4-month bank statement that you have to show, or 3 to 4 month bank statement that you have to show in your account. As long as you're able to provide all these documents, you're able to provide all your education certificates, your IELTS results, your REST reports, your and an employment letter to show that you're currently working, right, and reference letters from your work to actually show you have the experience that you're claiming to have, right? Yeah. And you need to, and as I mentioned, your degree will be certified by WES as well, and you'll get, and when they have your employment letters and your reference letters from your past jobs as well as a software engineer, and that for them, they could then verify, right, that you are, whatever you're claiming, is true, and you are actually a software engineer working in your home country, and you have prior experience or present experience, and you wish to come to Canada based on these skills, right?
And so would you say that's about a year or 6 months?
You asked that question. So it's after submitting your application, it takes 3 to 4 months to get approved, right? Okay. So the ITA itself, the pool, as I mentioned, that you might have to wait for, 3 to 4 months, right? Because it's a lottery-based system, right? So if you don't get selected in the first trial, it might be second, third, fourth, fifth, right? So you might have to wait 3 to 4 months. Like I had people who had submitted, some clients of mine who submitted their profile, but they didn't receive their IT until 4 months later.
Right. Okay.
Right. And so you may have to wait a while to get your IT. And then after After receiving the IT, we applied for immigration, and as I mentioned, even after application, 6 months later, we got approved, right? So it takes about a year in total.
Yeah, I mean, even a year, like it's not that long if you think about it.
Yeah, because a year goes by very quickly, right? But you need to, because you need to wrap up in your home country as well.
Absolutely.
You can't simply just pack your bags and leave.
Right?
So you have to give notice. You may want to sell a house, maybe, right? You
Yeah.
have to wrap up your children's education,
right?
Whatever you have to do, you have to take, and that gives you enough time, right? So, and even from the time of approval, they give you 6 months to enter Canada.
Got it. Okay.
Right? So they realize that you can't come immediately. So they said, okay, now that you received your immigration, you have 6 months to enter the country, right?
Yeah. And so this is about the federal skilled worker program, and like you said, you don't need an offer letter in Canada yet.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. If you want to apply under a different program, then obviously, and even if you have a job offer, that automatically gives you 600 points.
Oh, okay. So your points are higher.
Yes. That's a guaranteed immigration if you have a job offer, right? So job offer makes all the difference, and then you're also able to apply for different programs. As I mentioned, there's also other programs called provincial nominee programs.
Yeah.
So basically, every province have their own unique provincial nominee programs in which they offer opportunities for immigrants to apply to their provinces to fill up any labor shortages or occupation demand categories, right?
Yeah.
And if you were able to obtain a job offer in any of these provinces, then you could apply directly to the province.
Okay.
Not even to the federal.
Just the province itself.
The province itself under the provincial nominee program. And then what happens is that if you're nominated, you take that nomination and you apply to IRCC for permanent residence.
Got it. Okay. So what is an example of applying through a provincial nominee program? Who would apply for that, and why would they do that instead of the federal?
Because as I mentioned, it's a lower threshold, right? In the federal, it's like about close to 400 points, right? I told you that the Canadian rates called their CRS points, Canadian rating score.
Okay.
Typically you need close to 400 points, which is like the minimum threshold.
Okay.
So imagine when you have hundreds of thousands of people applying from across the world, you want to have as many points as possible, right? To be chosen in the pool, right? So obviously they will choose those who have the highest points, right?
Yeah.
As priority, right? So you may have to be waiting a while. So that's why people, instead of waiting, they apply. And there's no rule, hard and fast rule that says that you can only apply for one program. You can apply for multiple programs at one time.
Oh, at the same time.
Yeah, and then you withdraw your application if you get selected in any other programs.
Just to increase your chances.
Yes, exactly. So you can apply for a provincial nominee program, and you're asking for why would someone apply for a provincial nominee program? Because yes, if they have a job offer in that province, obviously, and they could get nominated even without a job offer if they have. If they have a work experience in an occupation and demand field, they could get nominated even without a job offer. Based on their points, right? Based on their previous education, based on their spouse's education, based on their work experience, right? And when they total these number of points and their age as well, right? Like the younger you are, the more points you increase, right?
So more chances.
If you want to do the assessment, that's how the assessment is done, right? For the points, to look at your age, education. Your English language test results, right? Your education, like I mentioned, at your work experience, right? So all these are calculated and gives you a total number of points.
Got it. So it's all encompassing, basically, of those total criteria, basically. So now just transitioning over into another program, which is the work permit. So now you have the work permit entry, or work permit application. This, I believe, is when somebody has a job offer. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. So what happens?
And what's the difference between that and the first?
So basically, a work permit you cannot apply for in Canada unless you have a valid job offer first and foremost, right? Yeah. So to get a work permit, and that's technically true, but technically also not true. Is if you're coming as a dependent. If you're coming as a dependent and your spouse has a work permit, you could also, if they have a closed work permit, you could apply for an open work permit. Based on their duration of their closed work permit. Right? So technically, yes, but one person needs to have a job offer in order to receive a work permit.
Just to talk, what do you mean by open or closed work permit?
Yeah, so I'll speak about that right now. So basically, and that relates to the first question. Yeah. So a work permit, so basically, this question I receive the most from clients from all over the world. They say, how can I come to Canada on a work permit? I basically say, well, number one, you need a job offer, right? So, and basically, and even to get a work permit in Canada, what has to be done if you to get a job offer, even the employer, even before the client receives a job offer, the employer has to issue the job offer and apply to Service Canada for a labor market impact assessment. Otherwise called the LMIA. Right? If they apply for LMIA, if the employer applies for an LMIA on behalf of their employee and shows that the employee will have a positive impact on Canadian society, that by having them, they will be able to come and train others. Right. And then if the government is satisfied, they will issue either a neutral or a positive decision with regards to an LMIA. And if they issue a positive LMIA, then we take that LMIA, and then there's an LMIA number issued from Service Canada, and then we take that number and we apply and we apply for a work permit to IRCC for that employee. Right, and that job offer itself is a closed work permit, because an employer is hiring you for a specific job, for a specific time, and say, I'm hiring you, full time for this job. It's going to be a 1 year or 2 year contract, right? So I'm hiring you for this position, and you cannot work anywhere else. This is I'm exclusively hiring you for my company, and I'm inviting you as a foreign as a foreign worker to come and work for my company, right? As a foreign temporary worker, because everything is temporary; it's not permanent, right?
Got it.
So they're called. So anyone who's coming from abroad under an LMIA is called a foreign temporary worker. And if they do receive a positive, if the employer does receive a positive LMIA, so that's the employer has the first step. They have to complete this assessment. They've got to be the ones to actually, and they have an interview actually with Service Canada. Right. So the Service Canada wants to verify that everything is genuine, and the employer has to show they actually advertise in Canadian society as well. Like we advertise for the job, we could, and they're going to say, the other candidates have applied. Why didn't you select those? Because they're going to say, well, maybe they weren't qualified. We can't find someone who's willing to work at some of our remote locations on evenings and weekends and nights. For example, going back to the software engineer company, if someone has an IT software engineering company that operates 24 hours, 7 days a week. And maybe it's based somewhere in Northern Ontario, right? And they need someone to work as a night supervisor, right? For the evenings and weekends, right? So and maybe they can't find any potential employees who could take those positions or fill those positions, right? So that as I mentioned, that is a closed work permit, right? That position is, and if that person is married, they could call their spouse as a dependent. And that dependent can then apply for an open work permit based on the duration of that closed work permit. So, for example, if the husband receives the job, the wife could come as a dependent on an open work permit, and she could find work, and she could legally work. She could be legally entitled to work in Canada. Any job that she finds, based on the duration of the husband's LMIA. Sorry, based on his closed work permit. Right, so that's the difference, right, between an open work permit and closed. Closed work permit is for one specific job for one specific time period. An open work permit is you could choose to work at any location, right, for any maximum amount of time, right. But in this example, the open work permit only applies for the duration of the husband's a closed work permit, right. For example, the wife says that her work permit could be valid for those 2 years, right? Until the end of the duration of the closed work permit for the husband's, right? For his employment contract, right? So as long as he's working there, you're allowed to work anywhere. But as soon as his employment ends, you can no longer work. Your employment also ends at the same time, right?
So just to kind of put an example on this, if let's say somebody is living abroad and they are working in their company and they find a job offer or they find the same work in Canada and they want to come to Canada for 2 years, they would apply for a work permit, and the employer would basically get them to come into Canada, and they would be working in Canada. Is that kind of how it works?
Under the federal skill or under
LMIA? The work permit application.
So they need a job offer, right? So for the LMIA, right? Obviously, as I mentioned, this is the responsibility of the employer. To apply on behalf of the employee. Like I'm doing an LMIA right now, right? So basically, we're applying on behalf of the employee, right? So is that what you're asking? Like
no, what I'm asking is basically if let's say I'm working in the Middle East, and I want to come to Canada and I want to just get just live in Canada for 2 years and do the same job that I was doing there, I would apply for a work permit, right? Is that how it works?
You can't apply directly for a work permit, right? As I mentioned, you need a job offer first, right? You need to have an approved LMIA, right?
No, but what I'm saying is if let's say my company also operates in Canada.
You could. There's also called intra-company transfer as well,
that's
right?
What I'm saying,
There's other exemptions as well, right? They're called intra-company, and they could issue a work permit, or even let's go for another example, like flight attendants, right? People who are traveling back and forth, basketball players, athletes, right? Artists, musicians. You could take all they have to apply for work permits as well, right? But you don't need a job offer for that, right? Because they're already here. And you just have to inform the government what you're coming for, the duration you're coming for, right? And as you mentioned, if there's if there is a principal or a parent company in one country and they have a subsidiary in another country,
right?
So they could, it's called an intercompany transfer. They can even transfer.
They can transfer.
Based to Canada based on working for the same company, right? Applying for a work permit on those grounds as well, right? So technically, I was speaking from the point where no one has any connections to Canada. They don't have a parent company in Middle East that also having a company. So when we were speaking with LMA, we were just speaking in general context. Now we're speaking more specific to an intercompany transfer, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And then we're also speaking about the people who will also come to Canada to have so-called gigs, right? That's what they call them, right? Gigs or assignments, right? Yeah. As I mentioned, different people coming for certain times to this country to work, right? Like film crew, right? It's another example, right? Someone has to come for 3 or 4 months.
Makes sense.
And they need to direct a film here, right? So the directors, all the makeup artists, everyone who's working here, right? They're all coming on temporary work permits,
makes
right?
Sense. Yeah. That makes sense to me now.
Because a lot of shooting takes place in BC, right?
Yeah. Okay, got it. So let's switch over to students now, right? Yeah. That's a big topic as well.
Yeah, huge topic, yeah.
For students coming into Canada, and obviously there is a process for that. Just talk a little bit about how a student can come to Canada and study here, what the application entails.
Yeah, first and foremost, they should... if they're looking to study in a certain area, if they want to go into animation, for example, or they want to go into what's it called, IT, whatever industry they're interested in pursuing in Canada, they would first have to go online and research the different colleges, universities, right, for those programs that they're interested in pursuing. Right. So after you find a program that's suitable for you, that you and a subject area that you want to pursue, then you could apply directly to those colleges, universities online. Right. Okay. And after applying to those colleges, universities online, either you could do, we have people here as well who could help you with that. There's also right. So, but I always say to the clients themselves that you should choose your college yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to study there. You have to ensure that it meets all your personal requirements, right? That it accommodates you to for all your needs, right? Some people say, no, I need a college that has maybe a 24 hours library because I'm a night owl and I like studying at night, right? So some people, you have to look at the facility. You need to see what type of accommodations they offer, like what services they offer that's in accordance to your needs, right? Especially if you're coming to study, like everybody has their own study habits, as I mentioned, right? Everybody has different learning styles. So it's very important for the client or the prospective student to research their own colleges and universities before coming. And after finding and the thing is, you can apply to multiple colleges and universities at the same time. There's no rule that says you can only apply for one at a time, right? So you can apply to multiple at one time. So I suggest that you apply to maybe 3 or 4 or 5 at most to any of these colleges or universities in the programs that you're interested in pursuing, right? So after you and if you do receive an admission letter, that means you could go ahead and start applying for the student visa process. Okay. So I suggest if someone from abroad has received an admission to any college or university in the program that they're willing to attend, then they should contact a legal representative, either an immigration lawyer or consultant, right? Either online or by email. They could just Google and they could find an immigration lawyer that could help them with the student visa process. So what the immigration lawyers do is that every time we apply for someone, we ensure that we place submission letters on their application, right? To ensure that we have a strong, solid application. We ensure that the client has all the necessary documentation to prove that they'll be able to financially support themselves in Canada, and that they have basically a settlement plan, right? Like what they're going to do, where they're going to live, how they're going to afford themselves, if they're going to do they have any additional financial support, right? So what lawyers do is that we ensure that the application is thoroughly completed. That every X is crossed, every dot, at least every T is crossed, and every something like that. Stuff like that. It's crossed. We make sure all the boxes are ticked off, right? So saying that we thoroughly examine every application, make sure it's fully complete. We attach submission letters. We attach all the necessary documentation, supporting letters to strengthen their applications in order for them to succeed. So, and after getting a student visa, they have, they can just come to Canada and they would have to then start attending their classes, and then obviously they would have to look for accommodation too, right? So that's another thing that they need to do.
And for someone who's applying from abroad, is there anything that they have to show from their previous schools whether they're in the Middle East or
so there's
Asia? What's the criteria for that?
So obviously the universities will request their transcripts as well, right? So obviously either their previous institution would have to directly forward them the transcripts, or they would have to, it's depending on the college university, whatever rules or regulations they have, they would ask for their educational transcripts, right? In addition to that, they will also ask for their IELTS tests. There's two types of IELTS tests. One is general and one is academic. So they'll ask for an academic IELTS result or an academic English speaking result, right? Which shows that they have the necessary English speaking skills prior to coming. English or French, right? Because French is also the national language of Canada, right? English or French speaking skills, right? And saying that there's also options of doing prerequisite programs before. It's called so English is a second language, right? ESL courses. You could do an ESL course before starting your program. That's also another option. In the event that you don't wish, if the college provides an ESL course prior to you taking your program, so you don't have to write the English test prior to coming, nor do you have to submit the results. So if the college or program includes this in their part of their program, and then you could do the 6-month course, and then you could start your
So there is an option for someone who maybe doesn't know the language completely to have that option with the ESL. But it seems to me that the IELTS test is pretty much a big deal across the board for any application, whether it's student or federal skilled worker, right? Because they want to make sure when you come, you're able to communicate and get by. I guess that's the whole reason, right?
Exactly. They want you have the minimum standard of speaking and writing in the English language, right? Or the French language. As I mentioned, French is a second language in Canada. So so either English or French, right? So and not just IELTS, but IELTS is the most widely used services for the English based testing, right? There's one that's called CPLEP as well. So that's also many people are also using that. Because some people find that more convenient for them. So as long as it's approved and attested by the Canadian government, as long as they recognize it as a recognized English testing institution, you could use that to apply for your immigration programs, right?
All right. So now that someone's applied to Canada, they're now in the country, they've gotten their application, visa or work permit or whatever it is. What are some things that you recommend as a first step that someone should do in the first couple of weeks or couple of months to get acclimated in society?
That's a great question. So since we're just speaking about students, let's start with them first. So students, what they should do obviously is that they need to look for accommodation and finding cheap accommodation, especially in GTA. It's not easy, right? So the best thing to do is, I guess, to find a shared accommodation, right?
That's a good point.
Which is cost efficient, especially for students, and which majority of students do when they come, right? So they try to find a place with people from their own country, just to make it a little bit more easy to transition to Canada, right? So, or find a place that that has all the utilities included, right? That has Wi-Fi and everything. That all they have to do is basically pay the rent, and that's about it. They don't have to worry about any other bills. And maybe they should find one and they should find one close to their colleges, universities as well, right? So what happens is that, because if you're living too far, then it'll make it difficult for you to travel to campus, right? So they should find something either on campus or close to campus that they could either walk or take the bus, right? So you need to navigate you need to learn how to navigate the bus routes or the subways as well, right? So everything is available online. It's actually very easy. So that's the best preparation you could do before coming to Canada. Is look where you're coming. This is my campus. This is their address. What is the nearest accommodation I can find, right, for an affordable pricing, right?
That's a good point.
Yes, and especially when it comes to other newcomers, right? So obviously, same thing. They would have to first and foremost find accommodation, right? So when most newcomers come to Canada, it's actually very expensive for them. So obviously, they're looking for some short-term rentals until they find something suitable. We have Airbnb, or there's other private. There are many private leases available as well for temporary leases for 3 to 4 months. They could find something, have a temporary furnished accommodation, so they don't have to worry about getting furniture right away or something, right? They could find something that's suitable to their needs until they find something permanent, right? So obviously, they should scope out society. And I recommend that people take advantage of all the free social services available, right?
There's a lot actually, which we don't know about, but there's so many resources out there, right?
There are many resources offered by the federal government, right? So there's these resource centers that are available, right? To help people with resume coaching, right? Job interview skills, right?
It's all free by the way.
Yeah, free by the way, 100%, right? They have English speaking language courses as well, right? And they have programs to help people to integrate into Canadian society, right? and then at these events you can meet other newcomers as well, right?
Yeah.
Right, and these friendships could last for lifetimes too, right? So that's why I'm saying you should take advantage of the free. And when we're speaking about resources, even you can go online and apply for free grants and benefits from the federal government, right? Especially for newcomers, right? So all you have to do is go online after you get permanent residency. You can start applying for different grants and benefits that apply to that that are applicable to you, right?
Right.
So they could get free money from the government.
Wow.
So that's what the best thing to, and not just provincial has different grants, right?
Yeah.
And the federal government has different grants as well, right? So they have to look at which grants that they're qualified for.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we've got to have a separate discussion about the grant stuff because that's something that I think I didn't know much about it either, but I know a lot of people need information like that.
And in child benefits as well, right? Stuff like that, right? So there's so much to discuss. There's so many, like even in my different discussions with different people as well, a lot of people don't know the fact that they're entitled to so much that and they could get so much free help that is available, whether it's through resources, whether it's through any financial aid. There's many resources in Canada that are offered by the government, right? Especially to help newcomers.
Yeah, no, that's good. And just to kind of talk about now the real estate side of things when it comes for new immigrants or people who have their permanent residency now in Canada, one of the toughest things that I find is, helping them find a rental accommodation that is cost effective because the rental market here is so expensive nowadays. But I think one piece of advice that I would give to someone who's new here, who is looking for accommodation, is that first property that you're going to get into doesn't have to be your dream property because right now you just want to get settled, right? You want to save your money. I think it's a massive mistake if you come to Canada and you're short on funds and you're going to rent out a very expensive property. Maybe rent out something that is not a 3-bedroom but a 2-bedroom, right?
Or a basement,
right? Or a basement,
just
exactly.
To start off, right?
Just to start off.
Like I mentioned, if you're coming alone in a shared accommodation, right?
Shared accommodation. Like I had an example of a family who I just helped out recently purchase a home, and they were new to Canada. They have their PR. They lived in the basement for 6 months. It wasn't easy, but I think what it allowed them to do was to get settled at least.
Yeah, it's a starting point.
It's a starting point, exactly.
Yeah, and then after a year or two, then they could reflect. See, we came to Canada, we started here, and now we're at a certain position. We have our own home.
Exactly.
We're having our own careers. Our kids are settled in school here.
Right.
We're functioning members of Canadian society. We're paying our taxes, and they're happy and they're satisfied living here, right? And everything is is good to go from there, right? So they have nothing to worry about. It takes time initially, and everyone has to struggle initially coming here to any new place, right? If you move to any new country, any new place, a new city, right? You initially need to struggle and integrate.
It's a struggle, and it was for us because I remember my parents when they came, the same thing, right? I remember when I was 4 or 5 years old, we lived maybe in like a 1-bedroom. There was no kitchen, there was no laundry, it was just a room. And I still remember those days, but to see my parents progress the way they did and provide us the opportunity, like that's there for everybody. But now just kind of going back on the purchasing side now, if you are new to Canada and you have your permanent residence, a lot of people think that you can't buy a property right away, but that's not true because you actually can. There are lenders out there now that do offer programs for newcomers to Canada at very competitive interest rates. And the key thing right now is to get the information because people don't have information, so they don't make decisions. But just understand that you can actually get into the market. And again, same thing. If it's your first property, it doesn't have to be the most expensive property. It can be just a starting point, a condo or like a 1 or 2 bedroom to kind of get into the Canadian property dream. And once you have that, you can obviously next 3 or 4 years, you can, upsize down the road. But those are some options that I would present to newcomers to Canada that are coming in and are trying to get acclimated to society.
Definitely. That they should do everything they can, right? Be cost efficient. That's what I suggest, right?
Exactly.
Especially when coming in.
Exactly.
Like obviously, yes, it'll be difficult. You have to have the initial struggle. But I think as you mentioned, it's the progression, right?
Right.
That's the key word, right? So they will progress over time. Everyone does, right? Everyone flourishes over time, right? It'll take maybe 1 year or 2 years, but after a few years, they should be settled in and everything should be okay with that time.
And like you hit the nail on the head, it does take a couple of years, but after a couple of years or 3 years, you will be acclimated into society. It just takes a little bit of time, get used to the cold as well. Which actually, when I talk to new immigrants, and I ask them like, how do you find the cold? And apparently they all love it for some reason.
So
I don't know why, but I've been here 3 years, but I still don't like the cold.
Everyone loves taking selfies and sending videos to their cousins and families back home.
We'll see how they feel after 5 years, but
they're tired of it, especially driving in that, right? So,
but Zeesean, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. Before we end the show, we are going to hit you up with some more questions, which I didn't inform you about earlier on. So going to put you on the spot again. Just some more personal questions to, kind of get some your
ahead.
personality out there. So first question is, what is your favorite place to travel? Some place you haven't been before. That you
I haven't been.
Yeah.
I want to go to Banff and Calgary. Like
Okay.
it's in Alberta, right?
Alberta,
Yeah. I've
That's a
never
good
been there. I've
destination.
never been, but I'm really
check it
looking
out,
for
man.
because it's one of the most Canada's historical and magnificent sites to visit, especially as a tourist, right? And even though I was born and brought up here, I never got an opportunity. And even I spent time in Alberta, I never got a chance to actually visit Banff. Yeah, unfortunately, right? So that's one of my I guess. It's on my wish list, right?
Yeah,
not bucket list, but hopefully.
I went a couple years ago, and it's phenomenal. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, in Banff, in Alberta, definitely. And I suggest others do that as well, right?
Yeah,
I heard it's absolutely gorgeous, right? So everyone should check that out.
Perfect. What's the best piece of advice someone has given you that resonates till today?
Never give up. Honestly speaking, I had to struggle myself, because it's similar to you. I came from a family not very financially, secure, right, growing up, and I had to see my parents work day and night. And then even for me, even when I had to go to study and I didn't have all the best resources, but I literally I never had to give it. I never gave up, even though I was finding many difficulties. I was having so many issues, right? But at the end of the day, I struggled, and I was determined that to find success, and then I was able to finally reach that success.
No, I've watched you up close and personal. I've seen your journey. Trust me, we've talked over the years. And I've seen that struggle, and to see where you are now, I really applaud you. So
and
congrats.
like I said, thanks. I worked very hard, and then I'm a prime example of the Canadian dream, right? It's like people ask why do they come to Canada, because they could give their children a better future, right? The second and third generation, right? So like I said, our parents, they did the initial struggle. And then they were able to, help me become a successful lawyer. And then now I could do the same for my children, right?
Exactly. And that's one thing that you've never taken for granted. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys, for joining us. If you like the content that we're putting out, just like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And we'll have Zeesean's contact information below as well. For me personally, when I'm applying for forms, I don't like doing it on myself because I'm not good at it. So highly recommend that you use an immigration lawyer like Zeesean, because you want to make sure that whatever documents you do submit get done properly, or else you're going to be backlogged again.
So one thing, it's not only about documents, but explanation letters. Why? Because we're missing certain things. Like we have to navigate these complex issues very carefully and very thoroughly, and we need to satisfy and convince IRCC that this person is the right person for this program. In spite of the fact that they're not meeting all the requirements, we still have to satisfy them, right?
So with a lawyer like Zeesean, you can be rest assured that you're going to be taken care of properly, and I'm sure you guys will have a great experience. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode.